Good morning folks, 21st Century Caveman here. Hope everybody's well, hope everybody's happy. Welcome to another episode in the series, How to Make a Man Cave, She Shed, Workshop, Cabin in the Woods. Whatever label you apply, the process is exactly the same. So as you can see, it's been a busy afternoon here. I've been insulating between the timbers on the walls. And this is the stuff I decided to use. Now, this may not be most people's first choice, but it came up in a sale at Wickes. The price was an absolute bargain, so I purchased 4 rolls, and this is what I ended up with. So this is actually loft insulation, 100mm thick or 4 inches, just over 8 square metres per roll, and it went down from £18 a roll to £12. Now, that was an absolute bargain, and as I say, it may not be people's first choice, but at the end of the day, it's still insulation, and it will still afford a decent amount of insulation in this build. Now, because of the nature of the stuff, I was not really quite sure initially when I bought it how I was actually going to fix it between the timbers, but you know, once I got going, it became clear that just by securing gaffer tape, or indeed any tape to be honest with you, between the timbers, it would actually hold it in place. And also these rolls of insulation, they're partially cut, so if you've got timbers which are 600mm apart, then you know these are a perfect fit. Basically, it's partially cut into 4 sections, and if you just cut it straight down the middle, then that will fit perfectly. You've just got to cut it to length, and there is also an element of friction fit here. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, you know, this worked very well, and once I'd actually cut it slightly oversized and put the tape up, you know, it didn't go anywhere. It was there for quite some time before I started to board over using some OSB. So as you can see, I'm just tacking some of the gaffer tape to the timbers just to sort of anchor them in really. Now, I suppose you could use anything really. I suppose you could use string, but the reason I ended up with gaffer tape was because, for a start, this stuff, I bought several rolls from either Lidl or Aldi a short while ago. The stuff is, you know, cheap, it's quite strong, and it's also obviously sticky, and it's got a width to it, which means that it actually holds the insulation better than something like twine. So this is a process I adopted here, and you know, it's a bit crude, a bit basic, but the fact is it does the job. Now the thing is, these partially cut strips, what you tend to find is the fact that, you know, once you start handling them, they tend to sort of fall apart really. So I'm doing this on my own, as you can see. It's a little bit of a faff, but the fact is, you know, the job does get done, and it will hopefully achieve the desired result. So I'm wearing a mask then. I'm also wearing gloves. This stuff is made of mineral wool, and I'm also wearing some spectacles. They're basically cheapos I got in a deal. The lenses are very thick, plastic, and I bought them specifically for DIY. So I'm protecting my eyes, my breathing, and my hands. And this is a really easy job to do in some respects, because if you see a cavity, what you've got to do, just cut a bit off and just bang it in there. As you can see, you know, there's no technical experience required for this. And as I say, you'll also see that if these are cut slightly oversized, when you actually push them into the cavities, you know, the friction fit in most cases will hold them in place. And it's obviously fair to say that the trickiest part of this process was sorting out the ceiling. So I'm using a Tack Life stapler here. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you'll have seen me using this multiple times laying carpet, and this is what I use to tack down the underlay before I actually fit the carpets. I'm using 10mm staples, which, you know, they work quite well. I did find actually that these staples, they fix better into these timbers than they did the OSB, which I found to be a lot harder, and I had to go back and, you know, knock these staples in with a hammer. Okay, so here you can see that I've just cut the roll down the middle basically, which gives us a couple of sections, just a case of cutting it to size. And the cut down the middle there is where it's already been pre-cut in the factory. So all you need basically just something to measure it out with, something to hold the stuff down while you cut it, and a sharp blade. I think one of the other things I'll mention actually is the fact that this insulation, as you can see, it came into contact with my skin very regularly, but you know, there weren't any rashes or anything like that, so I wasn't unduly concerned about using the stuff or if there was any skin contact, because there were no repercussions at all. Now, I did mention earlier that I'd actually gone over budget on this project, and one of the reasons for that was because I did decide to insulate this so it could be used all year round. So in terms of the additional costs then, obviously we've got the insulation, we've also got the boards which I'll be using to line this internally. So that's basically what put it over price, and also we need a big plastic sheet to cover all this stuff before we board it over. So they're the things really which, you know, bump the price up a little bit. So anyway, you know, here's part of the process from start to finish look. Just securing or anchoring the gaffer tape to the timbers, making sure they're definitely secure by stapling them, and then I'm just going to insert the insulation into the gap, tape it up and move on. Piece of cake. Right guys, as you can see, we're making some good progress here. I've got a little bit left to do, but there's only so much film you can do with something like this before the whole process becomes extremely tedious and boring. So I've decided to move on to the next part of the process and include it in this video. So here you will see a thick plastic sheet. Now this is 1000 micron. I bought it from Wix. It's 4 meters by 12.5 meters long, and it's basically a damp-proof membrane, 1000 gauge. Now I live in the Northern Hemisphere in the UK, so the climate here is sort of cold, damp and bloody miserable basically a lot of the time. So if you're actually insulating the inside of a building like this, it's important to make sure that you protect the insulation. And incidentally, I would mention that you need to get this stuff covered at the earliest opportunity if you're doing it in autumn or winter, because you don't want the insulation to get damp. Anyway, so the point is that you need to put up this plastic sheet, because invariably what will happen is, even if you line this with say plywood or OSB or whatever, after a period of time the water vapour in the air, the moisture in the air, will work its way through the lining and it will make the insulation damp. If it gets damp, it will basically start to rot. You're going to get mould rot, that sort of thing, and that's exactly what you don't want. So if you do decide to insulate it and you live in an area like this, on the inside you must put up this a nice thick waterproof sheet which is impenetrable to water vapour. Now you will notice that on the outside, whilst I did put up a waterproof membrane, it was actually breathable. This is not breathable, and you need to make sure that it isn't. So that's the difference. Now the sort of the tacker here is ideal for work like this. It makes very light work of it indeed, but you've got to make sure you hit the timbers, because if not you will tear the plastic sheet. And I did actually do this 2 or 3 times, but in a situation like that, in fact there we go, look, I actually tore that because I missed the timber. So in a situation like that, you just need to go back with a bit of gaffer tape, duct tape, whatever, and just cover up the tear, and that'll be absolutely fine. Now this roll costs £32, so you know they're not cheap, but it is a very heavy duty, waterproof and damp proof membrane. And of course it can be cut very easily indeed using a Stanley knife with a sharp blade. Now this is a part of the build which, to be honest with you, I did not enjoy, and the reason is, I suppose it's a psychological one really. Once I'd started wrapping the inside of this building in this black plastic sheet, you know, it wasn't a nice place to be. You know, it's almost as if it was like a psychopath's lair, and you know, he's getting ready, he or she indeed was getting ready to dismember their next victim. So this wasn't a particularly pleasant place to work, especially after dark, and I was glad when I was actually able to move on and start lining the inside of the man cave with some OSB. But look, as you can see, most of it's done now. Now this was a really tricky bit to do, especially given the fact that I was working on my own, and it's a right pain in the arse, to be honest with you. What I ended up doing was just to use some plaster as props, just to you know, clamp the thing up against the timbers on the ceiling, just, you know, rejig it basically just to make sure I got the plastic sheet where I wanted to, and then go over it with the tack gun and just start tacking in place. But this was a bit of a pain, and it was yeah, it was a cumbersome process. Clearly, if you've got two people, that's the way to go. So, spoiler alert then, on the bottom right hand of the screen you'll see some OSB, and basically I've been bitting and bobbing with this because of the weather and because of time constraints. I was just trying to do what I could when I had the time, you know, because I do work full time and also the weather's been really bad. So I've already started lining the inside of the man cave with 11mm OSB, but that'll be the subject of another video. I've just tried to sort of compartmentalise this basically so that you can see each different stage of the game, so you've got a clear picture as to what I've been doing. Anyway guys, look, there's no point in showing any more video of me tacking black polythene sheet to the walls or the ceiling, so we're going to draw this video to a close now. I'd just like to thank you once again for watching. I really do appreciate you taking the time to do so, and I hope that you find some of the stuff in here which I'm doing helpful. And yeah, have a great day where you are. Take care. Bye bye.